Welcome to the Alchemy Brothers Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Strong. We've just come to the conclusion of our first retreat of the year, the initiation retreat. We were joined by a powerful group of beautiful men who came together, who met authentically and really created this true bond of connection. And we're still in the integration process from that retreat, but feeling inspired and empowered by the work that we've just gone through. If you're interested in joining one of these events in the future, we actually have a wait list that we've just put up on the website, on our Instagram channel. So yeah, put your email address in and you'll be the first to hear about the next event, quite likely going to be in November this year. But today I'm joined here by my brother, Jack Weaver. Jack and I have spent quite some time together working and collaborating around the Alchemy Brothers project. Jack is the co-founder alongside myself. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to get to dive in deep with Jack. There's been a lot of changes happening, as you may have heard if you've been following us so far, around Alchemy Brothers, around the roles that we have in Alchemy Brothers. And yeah, it's a real joy to be able to chat a little bit deeper with Jack and see where this conversation takes us. Chronic illness in his early 20s led Jack to change his behavior and attitude towards life by putting his health and well-being first. Since then, he has been cultivating a deeper spiritual and embodied connection with himself and the land. As an acupuncturist, energetic bodyworker, and sound therapist, he is attuned to the subtleties and rhythms of the body and environment, weaving awareness into his movement-based practices, which are rooted in Qi Gong and yoga. Jack is also a singer, songwriter, drawing inspiration from nature and infusing his music with a heartfelt connection to life and land. With his diverse background in healing modalities, Jack's music has inspired and is inspired by the journey towards wholeness. Jack, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for the introduction.
Perhaps before we dive in, let's just take a moment to settle in, shall we? So you can just take a moment wherever you are listening to this, whether the eyes stay open, whether you feel like you want to close the eyes, but just take a moment to pause and punctuate your day, punctuate your experience with a brief moment of stillness, a brief moment of silence, a brief moment of awareness. Notice the ground beneath you. Notice the movement of your breath. You might just check in with yourself. Notice how you are now, in this moment. And Jack, I invite you, when you're ready, perhaps to check in. How are you doing right now? What's most alive for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling a little on the tired side, I'd say. That's what's a little bit most alive. But also thankful to sort of be here and in this space and just dropping in for a moment, actually, because it's quite hard at the moment to find those moments and that time to really take that time. I've noticed as kind of I've shifted into this new phase of life and of being a father and things. So each and every moment that has that aspect of just beingness is really welcomed.
Yeah, I resonate strongly with tiredness, I think, as I reflect back on checking in each of these podcast calls so far. I think tiredness has come up in nearly every one. It's incredible how the experience of tiredness, how familiar it is, but also how different it is to any other time in my life. And yeah, I should say I'm checking in with but a little bit of that, a little bit of tiredness as well. Last night was was a rough night, waking up every hour. It's also the full moon. Luan, my son, seems to be a little bit more agitated and disturbed when the full moon comes around each month. So we kind of have it marked in the calendar, and it's like, okay, we're in for it for a few nights. But yeah, other than that, I'm actually feeling really solid at the moment, really strong, really powerful, and perhaps it's a little bit about coming out of our recent retreats. Maybe it's something about this newfound kind of value and sense that I give to myself. But yeah, tired but solid, strong.
Beautiful. Yeah, so I imagine having that the recent Alchemy Brothers retreat probably gave some space for reflection,
Mm.
time with others, and dropping into a little bit more of your body.
hmm Yeah, I find that these retreats for me, I mean, it's also medicine for me, right? It's we're holding a space and a container for the brothers that come through, but I'm getting so much out of it myself, and um, yeah, this punctuating of my, normal day-to-day existence, and really taking a moment and slicing it out and saying, okay, this moment is for me as well as for, the people that I'm serving, but this is also for me. And um, I think there's something about a man taking some time apart to go into nature, to go into connection with other brothers, to go into self-reflection, to challenge himself, to learn something new. And yeah, at this recent retreat, I had this realization that uh, I had not been completely kind with myself. I had not been prioritizing myself at all in the recent weeks and months, and I think understandably so. My instinct was to and has been to prioritize family, prioritize my son, my partner, the households, my work, all of these things needing to be done and competing for my very limited capacity. But following, the perspective that I gained from this recent retreat was that I need to slice out a small chunk of that for myself as well each day. So I've been recently getting back more wholeheartedly into my practice, and yeah, really feeling the benefit and the value of that.
Wow. Kind of like filling your own cup so that it can overflow out rather than giving from an empty space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've felt that having not been part of this recent Alchemy Brothers retreat that you held, there was a part of me that has really missed that space actually, and that space that you talk about where we're connecting with other brothers. We're kind of we're coming together to really see each other, and to feel each other and to hear each other. And that kind of a space is so healing for men, especially in the culture and the world that we come from. Um, there's so much mask and ego, and it's quite hard to get through the sort of the veil that can be in front of or that we can put in front of ourselves to protect ourselves. So when we create that safe environment that in Alchemy Brothers retreats that we've held, I really feel like we've dropped into that space. And it gives that permission to really share from that authentic, heartfelt place. And yeah, I missed it. I really missed not being there. And because the nourishment I get, even though facilitating the space and there's a lot to hold within that. Um, uh, you know, Even with all of that, I have always come out of those retreats feeling so high, feeling, high on life, but nourished in a way that is quite hard to find in other areas of life. I really feel it's like a soul nourishment that happens there.
Mm.
And definitely it's my wish that men, cultivate and create these spaces and dive into these spaces so that they can feel that same nourishment.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the feedback that came through so far has been, it's been a beautiful reset, a recharge, a place to gain perspective. I've come with a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of vitality. I'm able to care more for my children, care more for my partner. These kind of bigger things, like it's really what that space enables us to do. And
Mm.
yeah, you were missed in the space as well. We spent I don't know how many retreats we've done together now, but it's quite some, and it's been a joy to be able to share this journey with you. And you've made the decision to take a bit of a break, at least for this year, and then you're going to check in and see how things align for you moving forward. But I wonder what that process was like, because I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but yeah, talk to me about that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, recently, for those of you who don't know, I've kind of stepped into being a father. I have a beautiful daughter called Sky, and um, I feel like we're going to touch on fatherhood at some point in this
I think
in
we're
this.
going there now.
But that's a hell of a rite of passage as well. I feel like probably the biggest rite of passage that I have currently um, uh, experienced in my life, stepping into fatherhood. And with that comes so much responsibility, comes so much uh, yeah, responsibility for the family unit.
Mm,
And there's a lot of pressure um, on time, on the availability of what I can sort of work on. And I had to really look at the areas of my life that um, I had, uh, yeah, I had to really work out what space and time I had the availability to and projects to work on. So um, I also, one of my main focuses is the retreat center that my partner and I run, the Shanti Space. And that's kind of like our main business that we have operational. And so that takes a big chunk of my time just to make sure that's running smoothly. Um, so having that part of the sort of the work dynamic, um, there was also obviously this beautiful project of Alchemy Brothers, which was such a joy to initiate and create with you, Jacob. Um, and although kind of we were sort of running a few retreats a year, a few maybe day events, little festivals. So the workload wasn't like huge. But even to run a retreat and to take, 4 or 5 days off, 3 days off, it's still a big commitment, especially when you've got family and mum and baby to kind of support. So because of those sort of formats, I find it hard to see how that was going to work in the context of supporting family. So that was one of the major reasons I decided to sort of have a step back. But also I had this other flourishing career that's being initiated through music as well. So, and that's a little bit of like my soul feels very aligned to be working on and sharing the music that's kind of coming through. So I had to sort of like also create space for that.
mm,
Um, and I think going with where the energy was, the music felt right to continue down that route for the immediate kind of future. But I couldn't do it all. So there was these three sort of pieces of the pie, or four with family, which is a big piece. And yeah, one of them had to be left out. So for right now, and Alchemy Brothers, although like I'm missing being in that space, and I'm also recognizing that actually it might be a space that is very much needed to nourish myself. So it might have a as I'm going through this year, um, I'm feeling like I'm being able to reflect on what it actually means to me, and what these kind of spaces and this men's work, what kind of role it's going to have in the future as well. And that's still being worked out. Um, but yeah, we'll see where we are at the end of the year.
Yeah, it seems to be, yeah, to reflect back on this transition into fatherhood. It came with a whole reprioritization of things. Um,
Mm.
just the way that every day unfolds, the way that sleep unfolds, the way that, you spend your time, attention, and resources in those, particularly, I think, in those very formative months, the very early months, and the late term of pregnancy as well was also quite demanding. It really asked things to shuffle around, and I touched on before, but I found that in my experience, myself was kind of shuffling further and further down down the list, especially as more and more things started to come in. And it's like, okay, well, I need to make sure I'm doing all of that. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, where did I go? It wasn't necessarily, an intentional thing. It was kind of a byproduct of not, um, of prioritizing other things before.
Yeah, which in a way, Jacob, though, is kind of like it's a necessary thing to prioritize the babe and mum. To like have a mother-centered focus is, I think, and a baby-centered focus is just like, I feel like there's a lot of healing to be done in that space, especially in our society that is kind of like, it has the sort of the old system that it has a bit of patriarchy in it, and systems that are kind of male dominant. I feel like shifting that towards like a mother baby centered space is very powerful. Um, but also I recognize that it's easy, like, and I can see it in the way that my makeup is as well. It's also to kind of like potentially give from a space that we've already talked about that's maybe an empty cup. It's like constantly giving and
Mm,
not necessarily finding that time where we nourish ourselves as men. And
yeah,
I've that a little bit that category as well. But I deeply believe in the need for us to really look out for the mums and give them the support that they need, because
yeah.
it's just such a big job for them too.
I couldn't agree more. And you and we're kind of also uniquely placed. We've made lifestyle and choices, and I've made decisions. I'll speak for myself to be in a position where I can be at home and supportive of my family for as much as I can be. And I work from home. I occasionally venture out of home, but for this period, I've basically been rooted in the household. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that availability is not necessarily there for all men and fathers. Quite often, it's a return back to work that comes quite shortly after. And you're right, this is where, the system is not really supporting of the care of mothers, because all of a sudden the mother is then left on an island nearly. Maybe she has some supportive friends, maybe she has supportive parents that would come and be there. But it's a far cry away from, say, the village mentality where there was the whole support network of like, okay, all of the women in the village can come and support the mother. We now live in these households where it's, there's just two caregivers in the household. And when the father, let's say the father goes back to work in the office or the job, the mother is then kind of left alone. And and I can relate to this because I spent many years working 9 to 5 in an office, and with the 1 hour commute on either side, you get home and there's not much left in the tank by the time you arrive home. And I couldn't imagine how challenging it must be for a father and also for a mother, but for a father to come back home, arrive back home, having missed the day with his children, all of a sudden having to deal with the situation that could be at home, maybe the dishes, the dinner, the crying, the tiredness, the stress, and all of that in those few hours, and then you stumble into bed, and then you wake up the next morning and you do it again. It's just to think of the contrast between my experience and that experience. It's something I think that should be highlighted. And I know it's what I was also raised in. My father had to do that, you know, for me in the family, and that's yeah, that was felt.
Yeah, me too, in how I was raised as well. My father was not so present. So he was on the weekends, but on the weekdays certainly not. And even he was working in a different country at some moments as well in my younger years. So um, I feel really blessed that my partner Jess and I we've created a way of life that we can both be present, and with that there's a dovetailing of support that we can give to baby Sky. And even with that, it's still it's so much, and that's why yeah, it used to take a village. So yeah, really feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of information and studies and research coming out lately that are also demonstrating how necessary it is to have a father present in the household for the development of our boys and our girls in their formative years. The father helps, kind of brings in this aspect of, if we were to look at it in a masculine feminine polarity, let's say, the mother's offering this kind of nourishment, this care, and the father's kind of there to offer play and challenge and an invitation to kind of explore. And as a child grows up, and as I'm sure we will continue to discover, although I feel like I'm already at the point where I'm reaching, Luan is now crawling around and he wants to play, he wants to chuck tantrums. It's quite interesting to observe. But the role of the father really being able to bring in these aspects which helps the child to develop their capacity to self-regulate, to for empathy, and for really, yeah, just having that solid foundation in life to which to build from. And just because two parents are together, if the father is out of home for most of the time, there's a certain absenteeism, that's there. And we've created this society that seems to promote one parent being caregiver in any given moment. And something that I feel very blessed, as you say, is that we have the triad at this point. We're able to be together as a family many times and share many moments together. And I think that's really, really beautiful and rich for the child as well growing up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, well, it leans towards balance, doesn't it? It leans towards a system that has both poles,
Mm.
um, and yeah, I feel that that's Yeah, it's so important that these two archetypes of the masculine and feminine are kind of like are seen and felt, in this space. Uh, yeah, I really feel that that's key to cultivating healthy kids. And it might not be possible in some daily life and with work, but it's like if we are going to work and we're not there in the daytime, it's like how can we be present when we are there? I
Sure,
feel like
yeah.
that's
Yeah, to
also,
be to being fully present when we in the moments that we do get to spend with our children, how can we be fully present?
yeah.
And it's also a challenge actually of if you don't have the distance, having the same being in the same house and spending all this time together, it's like I notice within myself there is a tendency to be doing many things at the same time, such that I'm not truly present in any of them, really. So I might
Yeah.
be, and this has led me to make the decision to separate my office space and have work hours again, even though it's in the same house, because then there's this clear divide of like, now I'm working, now I'm present. Now I'm working, now I'm present, rather than having this carryover that then inevitably, my mind is in other places and I'm not fully present on Luan and Flora when I should be. And I
Yeah.
found that creating a bit of structure has actually really supported um, that impact.
And has that supported also Flora? Has she felt that that supported the daily kind of rhythm of things?
Yes, yeah, for sure. So the critical component is that it always needs to be adapted because Luan's rhythm changes so regularly. But I've recently come to I've even written down an approximate schedule that's up on the fridge, and that will serve for this phase, let's say, of his development. Um, but the benefit for her is that I have a certain degree of flexibility in the schedule, but I need to work X amount of hours in the morning. I need to work X amount of hours in the evening. I can be with him for X amount of hours. And then this is the preparations for meals, hours. And then this is time that we can go and spend together. And I
Yeah.
guess what it has helped her with is knowing what is kind of happening when, and that everything is kind of being looked after as well. She can see what's happening for the week. She knows that the tasks that need to be done are going to get done. I think, appreciates, or I feel that she appreciates the structure that I'm kind of bringing in, but also it's not too rigid. We're not binding it. There needs to be a degree of flexibility if he has a bad night's sleep or if something spontaneous, happens throughout the day. But I feel that this is something that the father can bring,
Yeah.
or the
Very,
masculine say can
yeah.
bring, masculinity can bring, is this kind of structure and container.
A little bit of direction as well. Actionable direction, I feel is, yeah, a good
Yeah,
trait. Um, yeah, that's definitely something for me to reflect on. Like the way that Jess and I have generally been, we've been, quite spontaneous in how we meet the day and how we work as well, even together. We work together, so we've always been quite in flow. But I do see that, like, even bringing in a bit of structure, having the structure that the babe has brought, which is like me getting up in the morning earlier and taking Sky for a walk, and she gets a bit of a sleep. That's already giving us some kind of, we've got a rough structure there. But you're inspiring me with this to sort of take a little bit, that maybe a little bit deeper in
mm,
order to cultivate a little bit more of um, get the most of when each of us are taking the baby. The other one has their own time to really nurture themselves and recharge. Because I can find myself sometimes being drawn to um, you know, to sort of stay in the family unit because potentially it's like supportive for me to be there. And if, someone needs a glass of water, someone needs to, to be fed or in whatever way, in the moment, it's handy for me to be there if, Sky's asleep on Jess. So I can feel that sometimes I'm looking to hold, but then through that, I'm not finding that space enough, or that time where I'm really kind of like able to focus strongly on what it is that I need to do.
Sure.
Um, so that inspires me to bring a bit more of that structure in. Mm.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, if I come upstairs and I work for, let's say, a 2 hour session in a row, when I walk back downstairs and then I go into Luan's room, he's set up for his playroom, just the way that his face lights up when he sees me because I've been absent for, those 2 hours, and he's just like, oh, yeah, this dad, he's back. And I just light up and I'm like, yeah, let's go play, let's go do something cool and fun. And it's
Mm.
uh it's also, I think, you know, maybe there's something to a degree of, this expression of absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I think if we're kind of conscious with that, it's not like being absent, but taking
Yeah,
some
yeah.
space for a couple of hours lets him also, all of a sudden it's fresh. I'm there in the space. There's something different. There's something new to play with. There's something new to do. And likewise, when Flora takes her space and then comes back to him, he just the surprise and the joy and the lighting up on his face. It's truly something.
And I suppose you're leaving, when you do take that time, you're kind of like leaving the space, like, so Flora has her needs met,
Yeah.
glass of water, some tea, some food, a snack or whatever, all
Yes.
available. So that yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good point for fathers to be. I'd highly suggest like that kind of prioritizing that kind of thing, that your woman is left with her needs being met,
Mhm.
is a really, that's gonna snowball into more and more connection and care in the relationship,
Mhm.
which is under a lot more stress than it used to be, having this little third being in tow.
Yeah, and I wanted to pull on what you said before about direction, like holding a sense of direction of where we're going, and I think having this discussion, whether it comes into a structure or whether it ends up being something that's more in flow, but at least having a discussion around, okay, what's important right now? Where are we going? What's the trajectory? So then we can inform our moment to moment decisions. For example, when I put together that structure, there was a bit of a discussion around like how we're going to allocate our time, and in some ways a bit of a negotiation of like, okay, no, I forgot that piece. I need to add that piece back in, and which means that maybe I need to give less time to that. Or, there's a bit of sensing the bigger picture and not getting lost, in the trees and forgetting to see the forest, and gaining a bit of perspective. And then when I'm making decisions, and if I find myself with a small piece of time, or needing to make a decision in day-to-day life, there's a sense of like, okay, this is right now, this is the bigger idea, this is the bigger direction that we're heading towards, and it makes decisions a lot easier to make. It also makes uh, everybody's clear with expectations. What does Flora expect from me? What do I expect from her? What do we expect collectively to be offering to Luan as well? Um, and I think having that kind of transparent is helpful. Otherwise, I find myself trapped in a bit of like, what does she need? Is there something she's not asking for? Is there something that I'm forgetting? But really, if we can upfront a lot of the conversations, it makes it so much easier to then make sure that everybody is feeling nourished and held and supported. At least that's been my learning, let's say, across the months. Mm. Also, we're charting in new territory, I feel, as fathers in this kind of modern time. I think many of us now are having the sense of like we want to be present, we want to really be involved in the raising of children when that was maybe not something of, past generations, but we really want to be present. And likewise, women's roles in society and in relationships are also shifting and changing. Um, we're kind of left to navigate this territory uh, by ourselves in a way. And that's why I find value in, sharing this journey with you as a father. When we've had our conversations, we bounce back ideas and inspirations for each other. And it's like, oh, I didn't think of it like that, or I didn't think of this. But we're really trying to chart a new way of fatherhood, I feel, a new way of being as fathers. And it's not always an easy thing to go against the grain of society's expectations, parental expectations, our own expectations that we may be laying dormant. So I wonder how it's been for you to meet those various external forces that might want to corrupt or change the way that you're doing things. A few ideas are coming through, but I wonder what that topic might open up for you.
Well, firstly, again, I feel blessed in its own, there's blessings and there's also the other side to this. But living out in Portugal and where we do, we're kind of like in a way, we've kind of like uprooted ourselves from our original families. That were kind of, based in the UK, or, Jess has family also in Venezuela and things like that. But it means that, we're not surrounded on a daily basis. And surrounded sounds like it's quite like, whatever. I absolutely love my family and her family as well. But it's like, I feel like a lot of pressure can come through those kind of familiars in terms of how parenting and style and everything was done. And I
Mm.
feel like we're sort of cocooned being in Portugal and a bit away from that. So I don't feel too many forces sort of coming in and suggesting, oh, you need to do this different. Um, you know, Having said that, we've kind of like um, we've traveled back to see family and other things like that. And, sometimes there's, things can come up and suggestions can be made. And, I feel that, um, I feel that the way that we're going about this feels very right to us in the
Mhm.
way that we're parenting. And, we're kind of doing an attachment style parenting. So, trying to really cultivate this feeling of safety in the relationship between babe and parents, so and us. And
Would you say more on that before you venture forward about attachment parenting and like what does that look like, or what does that feel like? How does that
so
unfold?
so that on a sort of like a daily basis, I suppose that means that when it's like being very present for the baby in the sense that if there's a need, it's kind of like met in the best way possible in that
Hmm.
moment.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, so if there's an if she starts crying or she's feeling unregulated, we would step in immediately to try and solve that situation, or to create a regulation for her through our own nervous systems and yeah, meeting her needs like that. So I know there's lots of different methods, and I can't speak to the other ones because I haven't tried them. Um, for example, that would be the sort of like the crying out method, which would kind of like, um, where you would leave them. It's the kind of the opposite of that, I feel.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but with that comes a lot more. There's a lot of awareness and that has to be brought into each moment to make sure that she's okay.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it's something that I became very much aware of stepping into fatherhood is as soon as the word baby or father was typed into Instagram, all of a sudden my feed has been flooded with advice videos, reels, and all of these various people that say that they've got a method to manage certain things. And to be honest, I've found the amount of information and the diversity of modalities and the amount of experts out there, um, you know, pushing a particular way of thinking, just overwhelming. It's like there's just so much. If you type in like something like how to help a baby to sleep, you're met with so much contradicting information of all these various different ways. And um, once upon a time there was a sense of going to the mother or the father or going to the elders in the village to have that knowledge passed down on how best to care for a child. But I think something that in recent years has become apparent is like the previous generations were doing so many things that were not supportive and helpful, and in some circumstances outright damaging to to us. And we're kind of we've spent our lifetimes trying to unwind some of that impact. But this direct lineage of how to parent has seemed to be severed, and we're kind of flying blind. And the internet has come in as this and social media has come in as this like pseudo elder that has all of the information and advice that is fed to you through an algorithm. And and within that there's all these different sub uh topics and methods that branch off from the original method. And there's something about, I think, parenting through intuition and like what feels good, but then there's
Yeah.
also something to be said about being informed and knowledgeable. And so I wonder how you've wrestled with that
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
dynamic, because I know it's something that I've been struggling with.
yeah. I really I feel like intuition is a key facet to cultivate, and especially I feel like um, the babies we're spending most of the time with our babies, so we and the mum and dad, we kind of really get the time to really see how they're operating, to kind of like see the cues that might be there to meet the needs in the moment. So I feel that I think intuition is a yeah is a big part to play. And then, like you said, I think there's so much information out there. So it's like how to take what resonates, or how to pick out the gems and how to kind of like let go of the other stuff. And, Jess and I, um, we've kind of done our own research. We've done a few courses. Actually, we did a really beautiful course with this lady. I think it's called Innate Traditions on Instagram. Really worth checking out. Her course was incredible, and a lot about like um, a lot of like the modern science in there, but also a lot of the ancient wisdom,
Mm.
um, and it all being baby, kind of like centered, and just all about the developmental phases of the first 7 years and how important it is to for their brain development in those moments. And yeah, so I got a lot from that, which felt very resonant with the information that she was sharing on how to best yeah, parent. And I feel like that was like a bar to try and meet. She sort of set the bar quite like high in my feelings of like how to meet the moment, but also was sharing that um, it's only a few years, you know. That kind of like helped a little bit. So, but yeah, I mean, I think I feel like there's still a lot more that I could do to inform myself more as well. But
Mm,
um, I do slide a little bit into feeling more into the intuitive side of things. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I notice my tendency is to overanalyze, I think, to get more and more pieces of information. And
Mm.
I've been caught in a few moments where there's just been so this says that thing, this says that thing, this is this thing, and then in the end, I kind of end up just going with my gut anyway.
Yeah.
And it might have been the original thought or the original feeling, and it's incredible how often that unfolds. Um,
Yeah.
but then I'm
Yeah.
also, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I also it's also kind of like with all the information that there, sometimes it's just allowing the experience just to sort of play out rather than trying to add or do something as well. I feel sometimes um, can be, like I find with sleep, um, we haven't been so like, okay, this is nap time, this is nap time, this is nap time, just like on it in terms of that. But it's just naturally occurred. And like we've been going in that way and it seems to work out. So that's one example.
Yeah. I think if there's one thing my intuition tells me more so, it's when something's not quite right. I
Mm,
notice that the feeling is of like this feels a bit off is
mm,
more kind of aware for me than the one that's like, this, do this thing. So I kind of tend to discover the way forward by knowing what I don't want to be doing. It's like, no, 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 no. I can eliminate options quite well. That doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't sound right.
yeah.
And then often what's left is tends to be the way that
Yeah.
it's the absence of feeling wrong, I guess, for me is kind of how it shows up. Um,
Wow. I
yeah.
also feel like my partner's intuition is like it's like she's right on it always. So sometimes sometimes I feel like that's like if she comes in the moment that she feels strongly, I'm like I tend to trust that as well.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know how it is with Flora, but for me that I feel like Jess's ability to have this sort of feminine kind of connection to source, maybe through her womb or whatever it might be, she can really like channels that sometimes. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, beautiful.
Mhm.
So then I wonder how you found the general transition into fatherhood in the sense of uh, your own personal regulation. This is a I've noticed, for example, and I'll draw upon an example. Um, in the particularly at the beginning, there was some moments when, I'm trying to put Luan to sleep and he's crying and he's crying, and there just seems to be nothing that I can kind of do to attend to that and beliefs and old patterns and old thoughts around like I'm not adequate, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing well enough in this circumstance. Um, emotions of shame and guilt and anger and sadness and all of these things. I remember being in some moments where, particularly the less sleep, the less sleep it was, the more climactic these experiences were. But just where the emotions seem to become vast. And yeah, I wonder if you had any experiences around that, or if you found tools, or if you discovered tools in which you were able to kind of meet those moments and those deep challenges, whether sleep deprivation or wounds or emotional turmoil.
Yeah, well, I feel like with sleep deprivation, not getting enough sleep, it's that's a huge one for me because I just like I don't function particularly well.
Mm.
And but I tend to function a little bit more like I've just like my brain doesn't work so well. Um and yeah, and like that can sometimes play into triggers being more at the surface and less spaciousness being available in the moment, not to react. And um, I feel like the way that I have like lived my life, I've really tried to cultivate like a spaciousness and create more of a spaciousness around reaction.
Mm.
Uh, and I feel like I'm pretty good at seeing, okay, I'm having this response in my body. Um, it's probably going to, if this kind of fire is going to come out right now, if it's a fiery energy that I'm working with, then it's probably going to just like chuck more flames on already a fiery situation. So let's bring in a tool that maybe I've learned, which is like take some space, go and feel this, release it somehow, where it's not kind of like fanning the flames of the experience that's happening.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I feel good in that sense of like having that tool to sort of like function that way, and to create a little space. But where I feel like sometimes I'm not being true to myself is that I can nearly go the other way where I'm not actually connecting to the emotion,
Mhm.
that's wanting to move through, and I might be repressing it.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's where sometimes I can get caught, and then maybe like this was Jack a few years ago. That would be coming out maybe more passive aggressively
Mhm. Mhm.
rather than in the moment. So that's like a kind of like more of a pattern that I've had where it's kind of like maybe a resentment might build up because things haven't been spoken that needed to be spoken to. So, I've had to really work on that pattern. And it's for me, it's like learning to speak what needs to be spoken, but in a way that's not going to um, create a contraction in the other person so much. I know I can't be, it's not my responsibility what necessarily happens in the reaction of that person, but it's like offering it in a way that can be heard, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of medicine that can be, and a lot of art within that working with it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, I noticed, you know, I used to be somebody with very little patience, and
Mm.
it's been a big focus of my practice for better part of the last 10, 12 years to really cultivate patience and spaciousness, as you say. And I think having done a lot of that work before coming into fatherhood has been super valuable and beneficial to lean back on some of those tools. But then, as you say, in these situations where there's a real lack of sleep. Somehow it's like, oh wow, there's these patterns that are coming back up to the surface that I thought they were long gone, but no, they're there. They're just waiting for the right ingredients of stress and an absence of capacity to cope. Um, and actually, I think one of the tools that I've found to be pretty useful was a bit of humor, because I could recognize like, oh, this this thing again. Like, oh, look, it's the same thing playing out again and again. Or I would notice, I've heard stories from my mother about how I was as a child, and there are striking similarities between Luan and myself. He doesn't like to sleep, he's very vocal, he cries a lot. Even some of his symptoms, bodily symptoms that he was having really were following a similar trajectory as what I experienced growing up. And as I'm kind of holding him and caring for him, and I recognize these patterns rising up, I also recognize, oh, this is probably how I was raised with my mum. To me, I can see this exact thing unfolding between my mother and myself, and now here I am
Wow.
potentially enacting it upon my son. But now I have this perspective, and then I can see it, and I just had to laugh. I had to just laugh at the gravity of the situation, of the perspective that's kind of available. And interestingly enough, as soon as I met it with that kind of that humor, that joy, that kindness, that particular pattern hasn't risen its head again, which has been really, yeah, really interesting to kind of see. But yeah, the resources that we've kind of built up about being embodied, connecting to the ground, connecting to the breath, being able to move, like these are really, I think, essential aspects, and having an awareness of the body as well, crucial, I think, for navigating.
And just conscious communication,
Mm,
especially usually it's in relationship that things are getting triggered. So um, cultivating a spaciousness or a space to be able to communicate together when, maybe the fieriness has dissipated a little bit, coming back together and having that ability to do the repair work if it's needed, if it's necessary. And yeah, because it's a team game being parents. You know, you've really got to work together to create a functioning, healthy home.
yeah. Yeah, I think that spaciousness, and that you're referring to as well. The frame that I like to kind of bring as well when Flora and I are having, let's say, a heated discussion or a disagreement about something. Um, if if we start to get emotionally involved into the subject, when we're really experiencing these like the depths of the emotion or the vastness of the emotion, we're not really communicating from a sense of, ourselves. We're communicating from the emotion or from the past, or we're not we're not being clear, and clear and conscious in our communication, as you said.
It's like a very feminine, expressive way, actually, when we're in.
Exactly. Yeah. So what I've come to kind of practice instead is when I notice myself being thrown over to an emotional experience, I prioritize, instead of getting my point across or trying to win the discussion or the argument, I prioritize instead emotional restoration. Like, okay, I'm not communicating from a place of centeredness. Let's restore the emotionality, whether that's taking space and going for a walk, whether that's just disrupting the unfolding of the conversation, disrupting it and just saying, something like, I don't know, maybe I just want you to really know that I love you, or, whatever. Disrupt it, go make a funny face, tell a joke, just somehow crack the unfolding of this highly charged emotional experience. Prioritize the restoration, circle back to the topic at another moment. I think that's also an important piece. Like you still need to bring up the topic and still kind of uncover what was needing to be said. But in the moment where we lose ourselves to the emotion, it's not the most productive space to communicate and to hear from. You know, right? We're not really hearing. We're not really communicating what's happening on the inside either.
Sure. Yeah, it's like how, the ideal space, I suppose, is to have that centered groundedness whilst also being able to, feel what's happening, So I feel like that's where the healing happens when we can hold both of those kind of like poles in a way of the centeredness, and then the kind of
Mhm.
like the connecting to the part that's maybe got some kind of pattern, some kind of stimulation, some kind of
Mm.
kind of like learned response. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also coming into a balance between this kind of masculine and feminine needs within ourselves individually, in the sense of, sometimes emotional containment is what's necessary. If you're in a situation where it's an emergency, or if someone's in need, a real need, you want to be able to contain yourself emotionally in order to show up to that situation calm, composed, centered, solid, and really be in your masculine to be able to contain that. But then we also need to be able to kind of step into this aspect of the emotional expression and processing phase, right? It's not just like that's the containment and then the job's done. It's like, no, that maybe you've just watched someone die, or go through some serious situation, some serious illness, some serious pain, some serious difficulty, and maybe there's some real emotional residue that you're sitting with. And then on the other side of it, like you need to process the grief, you need to process the sadness, you need to process the anger, the joy, the excitement, like whatever it is, that that aspect also needs to be met, that need for the expression. And I think many men feel like that's a binary, or maybe have the perception that's a binary. We can only be in one mode, really, and that's kind of defines who we are. I think traditionally that was more the containment, or in its more let's say shadow sense, is like the repression, the suppression, the wounds, and then maybe the more recent times there's been this kind of shift into like, okay, men need to be more expressive and more vulnerable and more, and that is a really powerful thing. And maybe we did need to swing back completely in the other direction. But I think what is more, or what I feel is more necessary of a man, is how he is able to adapt to meet the demands of the situation. Is it containment? Is it expression? To be able to fluidly move and to recognize his own need to shift between them, but then also the situational and the environmental and relational needs to shift between those poles.
Yeah, and you're going to get a fully integrated man that can do both of that, can be in both of those, and can bring what's, needed, I suppose, in those moments. Yeah, powerful work, and I feel like, yeah, for me, that's a really key aspect to cultivate these kind of this central kind of like, you know whole, through the center of our bodies, that can feel it all, can express it all, but can also do it from this place um, where it's grounded and it's not getting lost
Mm.
in whatever expressions might be kind of like yeah, there, I feel that rootedness is a key, and uprightness is a
Mhm.
key aspect of masculinity. Yeah.
Yeah, you touched on embodiment there, and embodiment is something that we always revolved our work at Alchemy Brothers around being like one of the foundational pillars of being of embodiment. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about, from your perspective, the value of embodiment in maybe your current situation in fatherhood, but also uh, in men's work or for men in order to cultivate embodiment. Why should I cultivate embodiment?
Well, I feel like we store a lot of our experiences in our bodies.
Mm,
So it's a necessary part of the work to know ourselves and to undo some of the patterns that maybe have been passed through family lines, generational lines, through our own experiences. And the body stores it. I believe it stores it in, whether you want to feel it in the fascia or the organs of the body. There's a, you know, it's so important that we can actually start to bring more awareness and consciousness into these areas so that we can get in touch with the with these parts of ourselves that have maybe been disconnected from.
mm,
Um, and I think there's like a Chinese proverb that sort of says, um, if no one's home, all sorts of visitors come in, and that's
mhm,
kind of like from more of a Chinese medicine Taoist perspective, that if we're not aware and conscious in our bodies, then all sorts of things are going to come in, and um, so I feel like that's like the first part of the work is to really come into connection with ourselves and our bodies. And I feel like, our society is, it's all been, a lot of it is in the head. And,
mhm,
so much of like how we're taught in our culture is to be thinkers and not so much feelers. So yeah, for me, embodiment is so powerful in that way of reconnecting to self, and I feel like it's just such a deep well, the body. My experience is that it's like the layers of an onion of like uh, the work that I'm doing. I'm getting deeper and deeper into my body, and I'm just shedding that
mm,
little bit more, and getting into touch with these parts of myself that very, very vulnerable and tender, uh,
mhm,
and um, yeah, and so I feel like it's a life work to sort of go into this embodiment aspect, and from that, what I've experienced is that I get more space in my body. I get more spaciousness from the reactions, from the triggers. I get more spaciousness from the tension as well. The tension can be released through my system, and that might have looked like at the beginning, just even like trying to meditate. I couldn't like have any. I was constantly had a mind that was going around and roundabouts, and then the more and more I kind of like slowed down, softened, connected with the breath, that chatter slowly but surely created more space as well. So it's like training a muscle in that way of like unloading and taking out all of the things that we put in our backpack, and yeah, so that we can be free from what we've been carrying and some of the patterns that we've learned through our experience.
mm. Yeah, I heard a line recently that I quite like. It's overthinking is underfeeling.
Mm. Yeah.
I think that kind of goes to the heart of it. I resonate with your experience. The more kind of in my body I am, the the better able I am to navigate my life, really. My body, I think the body is such an intelligent thing that preceded our conscious awareness of it, right? So the body has always been in interaction and in dynamic and relation with the environment, with others in the environment, as this ongoing communication. So the body tends to respond to environmental changes quite rapidly. And if we are able to be kind of with that and tuned into that, our body is really, it's a compass on, it gives us a sense of the directionality, this intuition to move towards something or away from something, the emotional aspects of giving guidance of, what matters to us and in what way it matters to us. And so, yeah, there's this sense of like the body operating as a compass, but also the body being the means by which we do anything in the world. Even if what you're doing is, typing on a computer or something like that, your body is the vehicle through which you do anything. And the capacity of being able to use, to operate, to be in and to engage with the body, the more we're able to do that, the better we're able to meet life and the various obstacles, challenges, opportunities that life kind of presents to us. At least for the time being, until we get one of these, like, I don't know, virtual reality AI chip things, and you can say goodbye to the body, then maybe transcend into some etherical space.
Yeah, that's where that goes.
Hmm. So tell us, you mentioned at the beginning that you're writing music. I know you've been dropping some singles lately. I believe you dropped one single yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah.
Today, it was today. Okay, I was listening to it this morning. So yeah, tell us a little bit about this new venture, what it, what you hope to bring to it, what you get from it. And just paint us a
Yeah.
picture about that.
Yeah, so when I was younger, I used to sing a little bit and play. I used to play the saxophone and the bagpipes actually. So I music.
Proper Scottish.
Yeah, the bagpipes definitely got some Scottish points going there. But yeah, it was a part of my life when I was younger, but then I kind of lost it through the teenage years because it wasn't really a cool thing to do, like being more into sports and stuff like that. Uh, like felt more in the kind of the macho male kind of like culture felt more acceptable than like singing in the choir. So yeah, I kind of quit the choir, did the cool stuff. And yeah, and I think a part of myself, making that decision, it was, going a little bit with peer pressure and, my friends wanted me to hang out in that time where they were playing football when it was like, kind of like band practice or whatever. So in the end, I kind of like went towards the peer pressure and I went, rather than kind of like going with the musical journey. And I think I cut a little part of myself off with that. Losing that expression, especially with the voice, I feel like because I really enjoyed singing. And it wasn't until we kind of created the shanty space 6 years ago, and we were doing some medicine ceremonies, and I started using and singing in my voice in those ceremonies, and people were just sort of giving me some beautiful feedback about how they felt it really opened their system up, and I so I was just getting little pointers from the universe to say, maybe this is a little bit of feedback to say, oh, this could be something you do. And I'd taken up the handpan a few years before, and so I got the rhythm back and everything, but I realized that I needed to play something where I facilitate the voice. So I picked up the guitar and immediately like songs came through, and maybe it was the connection with the land at the shanty space, which If you haven't been there, it's really, really beautiful space in this forest in Portugal. And yeah, it really connected me a lot to my creativity. And and I felt like the muse that was kind of I was singing to was the nature that was around. And a lot of my songs kind of portray that, and I think it's kind of felt in a lot of the songs that I'm writing. Um, so yeah, and I felt like it was to me like a passion to care for nature and to reconnect us with the land. I think that's also a huge part of um, where we need to go as a society to create health and balance and to organize our systems around the natural way and laws of nature. And I know, Jacob, you feel pretty passionate about that as well.
Mm.
Uh, so for me to bring that into my life and to share that feels like a nice, it warms my soul to do that, and then to have also this part of the music coming through, it's like I feel like it is opening up my being in a way. So we've talked about like the embodiment aspect of dropping into the body. I feel like for me the voice is such an important part
Mm.
of that. um I think going back to kind of like my past, um, the way I grew up, I didn't actually feel safe to like voice my truth.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like a lot of my patterning has been around that. And and sharing and opening up my voice to sing has I feel like that's opening up a whole channel that of kind of repressed um, emotion, sensation, experience. So I think that's also potentially where the medicine is in it, for me certainly, and maybe for others who listen to the music that I create. That's my kind of thoughts around it. But yeah, it's an interesting journey to be on, and I'm still at the beginning of it. So let's see where it goes.
It always interests me and lights me up to see, at every Alchemy Brothers event, we inevitably end up around the fire sharing some songs. And it's always such a beautiful thing to witness men who perhaps had never really sang before in that kind of a context, but maybe even any kind of a context, and being able to just connect with simple rhythms, simple melodies, simple sounds to express. And the feedback around that is actually, I think, been one of the more surprising things for me, is the amount of feedback of like how much they just enjoyed singing around the fire. It's like, okay, we've got this fantastic event in the retreat, and but that seems to be a really crucial piece for many of the men, uh, which yeah, I think it's indicative of masculinity and what we how we frame it. Maybe that's shifting.
Yeah, yeah, and art and creativity. I feel like it's maybe a little bit been, it's not sort of honored in the same way that it maybe used to be,
Mm.
and I feel like it's a little bit like pushed out of us in our schooling systems, and I think reconnecting people to that kind of uh yeah, to that kind of creativity and that play that is part of music actually, is a really powerful piece. And this connection to the voice as well, like you say. I feel like it's a lot of people have that, maybe that block, or there's also like just the whole notion of being heard, to sing can be a really vulnerable place to be in for a lot of people. So if you feel that, there's some medicine there for you to share your voice. Yeah.
Mm. So where can people go to find your work, your music, and what's the best place for people to connect with you?
So on Instagram, Jack Weaver Music. And then on Spotify, you can, and all the major platforms, also if you don't have Spotify, on YouTube, you can listen to my music. It's under Jack Weaver.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Jack, thank you for your time today. And I just wanted to also reflect back that it's been a real joy to kind of create Alchemy Brothers with you and to work so closely with you. I find you somebody that really um, practices what he preaches. So you're not just saying nice things, but you're actually getting out there and putting your hands in the ground and doing work and getting involved in projects and really enacting and creating this world, this more beautiful world that we need to live into. So I just wanted to reflect that back and honor that within you. And
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm looking forward to the evolution of the Alchemy Brothers and where this is going. I'm really really excited to see that journey evolve,
mm,
and also just to commend you on sort of like taking it forward, um, whilst also in this intense transition into parenthood and everything like that, because I know all of the effort and the energy that it takes to do this type of a thing. So yeah, just really wanting to commend you and wish you the best for this year going forward, which no doubt I will be a part of in some way. Um, and I know there's a festival that's going to be happening in the summertime.
yeah, it's looking like it'll be the first weekend of September. We're aiming to have men's festival, men's work festival up in the Serra da Estrela in the center of Portugal. Um, 3 nights of camping, getting to really connect with other men, facilitators, musicians, DJs. It's at the highest lake in Portugal. A really beautiful scenery, really beautiful space. So the details for that are still unfolding. Again, if anybody listening is curious about that, I would direct you to subscribe to our mailing list, which is through the links on our Instagram and on our website. Um, and yeah, we'll keep you updated. But hopefully, we'll have Jack Weaver present, maybe offering us some songs, maybe a DJ set. Let's see. Let's see what the inspiration is called for. But yeah, hope to have you there, Jack, and hope to yeah, looking forward to continuing this beautiful friendship, brotherhood.
Amazing,
Yeah.
brother.
Thank you for listening, everyone.